Hey there, and welcome back to the channel. If it wasn't obvious by a single look at any of my work, but I really like designing characters and more importantly, stories for them to inhabit. I have been creating silly little goobers for yonks now, and most of these characters either existing in my mainline series, Time Bash, or Lost to the Endless Void. Though this isn't the case for my secondary project, Phasmatronic. Now, where Time Bash is the golden child, the one I nurture and praise, Phasmatronic has always been the one I would let out occasionally for sunlight before throwing back into the basement. Yeah, I shouldn't look after children, but neglect aside, my want to reboot this story started when I realised art fight season was rapidly approaching and I desperately needed to update these character sheets. But before we jump into these redesigns, let me explain what the story was originally. I first started thinking about this project in the hellish year of 2023, after realising I needed to stop cramming all of my ideas into one story and start thinking about concepts outside of Time Bash. So the birth of creating my own analog horror came to be. I've always been obsessed with horror, especially when a story utilises the blend of reality and fiction. It can be best seen in the found footage genre, where a story can be these outlandish concepts, such as filming a demon, but somehow still feel grounded due to it being a vlog-like structure. Which is probably why I think the genre works so well on YouTube. Marble Hornets, the grandfather of this genre in the online space, was the biggest inspiration for Phasmatronic at the time. The way the series used vlogs to depict a man's slow descent into madness due to being haunted by Slenderman is just the coolest way of storytelling in my opinion. All that to say, I've always wanted Phasmatronic to appear as a silly, unfictioned project, but in the end I never actually achieved that. Instead, the series felt like a jumble of thoughts I couldn't flesh out properly. The story was meant to take place on a haunted VHS tape which held the souls of the characters. The tape started off as a normal student film before becoming a survival guide / mystery into why the director died and the group being haunted by something filmed on the tape. There was an added-on Slenderman ripoff, and the characters were being replaced by their shadowy doppelgangers, which were also their future selves. It started becoming bigger than it needed to be, with an add-on of a town and monsters, and the one aspect I thought was cool to begin with, the haunted VHS tape, just became a footnote. Which is probably why I started feeling so disillusioned and burnt out. I just wasn't sure how to approach it again. However, that changes today. I'll be starting from the ground up, approaching this new reimagining by fleshing out the characters more, giving them actual personalities and interesting appearances, along with actually giving it a plot this time I would enjoy writing. So, very long intro aside, let's get into the first character. Up first, we have my all-time favourite character, it's Odette Murphy. I'm just out here full government naming her, I guess. In the original draft, she started the story dead, just straight up deceased. She was a ghost that would haunt the narrative alongside her sibling at the time, Taylor, and that's really all I had. She was also director of the short film that the group were making and the leading cause of all the hauntings, but that was also before the events of the story, so it wasn't really that relevant at all. It's kind of funny because she slowly over time became one of my favourite characters to draw, especially when I started making her this antagonistic threat who was obsessed with fame. However, I also never really added this to the original plot due to her being dead, so she became more of a standalone character that I just really liked drawing. So all that to say, she will of course be some type of antagonist in this rewrite. I decided to keep Odette's obsessive nature from the original, but this time making it around a piece of media she grew up with. I've always loved characters who slowly get obsessed with something that completely consumes them, which is why I wanted Odette to be the only real person trapped on the tape. She was so overwhelmed with the want to leave reality that she basically became the thing that brought her comfort, a recording of her favourite childhood cartoon. Seriously, she is basically just the tape now. Like, if you were to cut it open, blood and organs. Like, that's all you're gonna find. I also like the idea that there's a bunch of childhood memories also stuck on the tape now. Kind of in the vein of how people would record their, like, the birth of their child or their child in the garden or something. I wanted her to be the tape's mastermind, leaning towards the director aspect from the original, but throwing in fanfic author, as she would definitely write weird AUs for these characters to interact with. Basically everything that happens on the tape is her doing, for better or for worse. I will most likely be adding to her personality later as I'm still working out some quirks, same with a lot of the other characters as well. This is still just a fresh idea, but I do really enjoy writing a character like this. I think it's really funny that she is just a VHS tape. It's girl becomes VHS tape, I guess. Moving on to her appearance, she's probably the only one with the least change in her design. I've always liked her slight preppy appearance that she had in the original, but this time I wanted to lean towards more 90s 2000s attire. In some of her concepts I did play around with giving her a denim miniskirt, but it kept her making her look like a teenager, which was just weird to me. So I decided to just give her a longer skirt this time. The skirt grows longer every single redesign. Though I do miss giving her tights, like those are really cute, like the stockings are really cute. I did give her a fringe this time around, which I slowly learned I hate drawing fringes, and that was probably the reason why I never gave a character a fringe in the first place. So I guess I'm stepping out of my comfort zone with this one. She still looks cute at least, and that's all that matters. Now we're moving on to the fictional characters who originated from the tape, or in other words, Odette's comfort characters. None of them know that they are cartoons, well except for one, but like, I'll get to her later. Much like I explained in Odette's section, she used to have a sibling and that was Taylor. They were the main character who were investigating their sister's death while also being haunted by their future self, who would pass on cryptic messages to help them end the cycle. However, much like everyone else, Taylor eventually dies, never breaking the cycle. They were quite anxious and I guess depressed, though who wouldn't be when you're being haunted by your dead sister? So I guess this had to change. With that established, I decided to take a large departure from Taylor's original personality and design, as I never really vibed with it. The design wasn't bad per se, but I felt like it could definitely be improved on, so I decided to combine them with a character I was planning on discarding, Oliver. Okay, so Oliver was an archivist who died and became a bit of an antagonistic force towards the group. He was a spy for the enemy and tried to take down them from the inside. But he also was a one-note villain, so it's just like everyone else. But he did have cool glasses. So I decided to steal the cool aspects such as the antagonistic elements, but tone it down to be more silly. So that's where Taylor being this megalomaniac phone psychic came to be. I adore the idea of a phony psychic who appears so whimsical just to lull others into giving up their money. However, their schemes normally fall through due to their over-planning and also everyone sabotaging them because they don't want them to steal money. As for their design, I wanted it to be a mix of a mad scientist meets the whimsy-core aesthetic, so I leaned towards the monochrome hair akin to a traditional mad scientist and the mismatched colours of stars and spirals, which is really present in whimsy-core. And of course, I couldn't forget the glasses. They got little spirals in now, they're even cooler. I decided to throw in a magic 8-ball at the last minute as well, as I think it would just be funny that that's how they tell fortunes. They don't believe horoscopes are a valid way of reading a fortune, but will still use a magic 8-ball. Ever so fitting for a scam artist. Heather was the other main character, and would take Taylor's place in the narrative after their death. She started off as the group's cameraman because she was camera shy, but eventually would be the one to document most of the misfortune. I think she could be best described as an extreme Fluttershy. I don't know why Heather was inspired by Fluttershy. I was not a Gen 4 kid, but it's funny nonetheless. In this early draft, she was very close with Odette, which led to her own investigation outside of Taylor's. This slowly led to Heather becoming overcome with obsession, which fed into her need for answers. I never really drew Heather or developed her for that matter. She always felt like a bit of a one-dimensional character that I threw in at the last minute, which is why I really needed to develop her more here. I decided to reuse her shy personality in this rewrite, but this time thinking of how she would act around her friends instead. She might be shy around strangers, but she's very caring and friendly with the people she considers close. Alongside her friends, she also adores gardening, but is really bad at looking after many living things due to her caring too much and accidentally killing them. So she remedies this with reading her sorrows away with a good book. I'm still trying to develop her more, but I love the idea of the only thing she is good at looking after are roses, but she always ends up cutting off the tops of them due to her fear of killing the flower, and subsequently the idea of her ever finding love. When it came to her design, she somehow ended up being inspired by Fluttershy once again. I used a few human designs as reference for Heather's outfit. I don't know, I just really like the floral hippie vibe that only human Fluttershy has, I guess. Alongside this hippie vibe, I also wanted to make the apple she had on her shirt more prominent. One of the problems I had with her original design was that she was only made up of green, and those greens didn't mix well. There was like a little bit of red, but you could never actually see it because it was hidden by her cardigan. Which is why I wanted to add colours such as red and pink so it could even out the green colour palette. I really like how Heather turned out, especially because my favourite fruit are apples, so I will jump at any opportunity to personify an apple, but her colours just mix so much better now. Heather alongside Taylor have probably got to be my favourite designs that have come up for this project. It's kind of funny how I'm only enjoying the characters now, even though these were meant to be the main characters in the original series. Heather and Taylor both had interesting aspects to their characters, but I never really figured out what I wanted to do with them originally, so I'm actually quite happy that I've finally given them both interesting personalities and designs. With that said, I also wanted to grow upon their relationship in this rewrite, making them quite close friends, as I find the dynamic of overly energetic person is best friends with the quiet one really funny. Taylor would say Heather asked for no pickles at a McDonald's. Damien and subsequently his sister were the secondary characters in the original draft, which is really funny because apart from Odette, Damien was also the one I would draw a bunch. I don't know why it was those two specifically. They were just both fun to draw. He was tricked into directing Odette's film after her death, but he was also this tortured man who was continuously possessed by a rabbit demon, and he would smoke to feel in control. Yeah, he was just really, really edgy. I cannot tell you more. I don't know why I wrote this character like this. Alice, his sister, and himself were probably the only characters which had a close relationship, or well, one which was more fleshed out than the others, which is quite laughable. He wanted to protect Alice from the horrors, but she wanted to see them regardless. However, Damien, much like the running theme here, never had a personality and was just the guy who got possessed a bunch. So when I was rethinking Damien, I still wanted to keep that protective nature of him, as I want him to be quite protective of Alice and subsequently his friends. He is quite laid back and normally watches events play out before acting, due to him being on edge because of Odette's meddling. He doesn't always know what is happening on the tape, but he is normally the first to catch on due to his closeness with Alice and his intuition of something being off. I really wanted to build up his relationship with Alice in this rewrite. I decided against them being related, as it just feels a little bit unnecessary. However, they are still quite close and he still does act like an older brother figure towards her. So far, Damien is the only one I haven't really fully fleshed out, much like the others. I definitely have ideas, but I still need to come back to the drawing board and develop more. As for his design, I didn't really change a lot from the original, but I did update features such as his hairstyle, shoes, and pants. I'm not entirely sure what was up with past me, but I could never figure out how I wanted his hairstyle to be. I ended up making 2 references at one point, and both look quite bad. I decided in the end to lean towards a mullet, which was the style I started drawing him in the most towards the end of the first draft. I just kind of like giving the sad man sad floppy hair, I guess. When it came to his outfit, I wanted to lean towards more of this street style, which was seen in the 2000s. Like, if you can guess, a lot of their aesthetics are 2000s. I feel like a lot of it would have taken place during that time period because of VHS tape. I think I just wanted a reason to draw a character with baggy pants, which, like, seriously, look at these pants. The shading looks so good. I can never shade like this ever again. Like, it's not gonna happen. It's never getting better than this. And of course, lastly, I had to bring back the smoking addiction. You can't have Damien without smoking the pain away. Now to end off with the real main character of this story, it's Alice. She was another secondary character of the original story, and her personality could be best summed up as Damien's sister. She did have a cool goth aesthetic, was Heather's girlfriend, and was terrified of fire, but seriously lacking in any interesting personality traits. Seriously, when I was rewriting this, much like Oliver, she was on the chopping room floor for the longest, until I realised why I named her Alice. Now, I'm no stranger to adapting elements of Lewis Carroll's novel Alice in Wonderland into my own stories. One of my final year university projects was a reimagining of said story, so it was like a switch that had flipped in my head. Odette's comfort show was now going to be an Alice in Wonderland inspired cartoon, with Alice being the main lead. This cartoon concept completely shifted the whole story after this point. I kept on throwing around ideas of each of the characters being linked to a movie or show recorded on it. However, it could never explain why Odette was randomly stuck on the VHS tape. So with this added context of it's a cartoon, it really helped me cement Odette's reason for escapism. Now when it comes to this cartoon, Alice was originally the main lead until Odette started meddling with the tape, causing her to now just be a secondary character in Odette's world. From that point onwards, it became a bit of a living hell for Alice, mainly due to her being the only one that knows what is happening alongside Odette using her like a puppet, kind of in the similar vein as Chris from Deltarune. Due to this, Alice develops a large hatred of Odette, leading to her making a deal with the real villain, Mr. Rabbit. Now, Mr. Rabbit was a leftover from the shadow doppelgangers from the original story. Before coming up with the cartoon concept, I was playing around with still adding the shadows onto the tape, but nothing really stuck, so eventually I just had to drop the concept. But I still wanted Mr. Rabbit to be a part of it, as he was the only one I had actually fleshed out properly. So that's where the idea of a demon being born from anger and magnetic decay came to be. Any of the glitches, static, or analog horror nonsense which will be on this tape will be because of him. I'm still developing Alice and Mr. Rabbit, as it is only recently I had the brain blast of making the group be on a cartoon and subsequently a demon who is the embodiment of analog horror. I didn't make a full illustration like the other characters, as I only had come up with a concept for Mr. Rabbit towards the ending of my drawing stage of this video. Here's the concept. It looked kind of cool, but I have no idea if I'll change it later on. I really wanted Alice and Mr. Rabbit to be quite similar in appearance, as I thought it would be cute to keep up the Alice in Wonderland / White Rabbit theme with them. This is totally not because of Alice making Mr. Rabbit out of malicious intent towards Odette. I wanted to give Alice aspects of her original gothic design while also shifting it towards being that more Alice in Wonderland themed appearance. So it's kind of like a alternative style meets Alice in Wonderland, I guess. I wanted to keep her design quite subtle, as she doesn't want to draw attention to herself most of the time. However, that's also hard when she is quite opinionated and is normally the one protesting about Odette's rewrites. One of my favourite details was giving her a lucky horseshoe. When a horseshoe is facing down, it is said that the luck is pouring out and normally is placed in homes for luck to be poured over the house. In this case, I wanted it to symbolise how she wants the group to be covered in luck, as none of them are wiser to Odette's plans, making Alice the only unlucky one in the process. Alright, so in this last section, I thought about touching on the plot. I did talk about it a little bit in the character segments, mainly in Alice and Odette's, but I kind of want to flesh it out a little more, explain a little bit more of the analog horror and unfiction side of it, and, sort of do a kind of a summary, and also touch on things I didn't get to mention in the other two paragraphs. As we are well aware, the VHS tape was Odette's comfort show before she decided to leave reality and become one with the tape. On said tape, however, wasn't just a cartoon, it was a patchwork of shows and movies which had been recorded over the top of throughout the years. I really wanted to utilise the idea of a bunch of shows becoming the backdrop for Odette to come in and mess around with. Every time the viewer rewatches the tape, it's a new story Odette has written them into. However, due to her carelessness and influences of Mr. Rabbit, it normally descends into horror and character deaths. The show could start off as this happy-go-lucky sitcom, but by the end it's this existential nightmare, with the characters becoming self-aware of their circumstances before forgetting after the tape is rewinded. So it's kind of like Groundhog Day meets the analog horror genre. Now, due to this self-awareness, the tape has become this urban legend in the real world, forming rumours such as people saying it will show you your greatest fear, or others saying it was from the dark web. However, no one has been able to find it yet. Now, while also developing upon this concept, I decided the series needed a name change. Phasotronic was fine, but it also wasn't a real word and didn't really fit the story I had started developing. After going back and forth between a few names, I ended up landing on Tape 1111. I really liked the idea of the name being 1111, similar to a date you would add to a tape. And more importantly, it's Odette's birthday, cementing her as the tape completely. Of course, this is still in development and there is plenty of stuff I need to flesh out. So if this video performs well, I'll most likely make a follow-up exploring more of the tape and the Alice in Wonderland cartoon. I've already picked out roles for everyone. I'm really excited to design them. However, this is all I have for you today. These characters will be up on my art fight. Yes, this was purely an art fight advertisement, so if you found any of these designs intriguing, you should totally attack me. Comment down below which Tape 1111 character is your favourite, or if you want a part 2, I really need to be pushed into making these Alice in Wonderland concepts. Thank you for watching the video. If you liked it, please like, share and subscribe so you can keep up with more of my wacky antics. I'm also almost up to 2k, so that would be kind of cool if you guys subscribed. Anyway, have a good one. Bye!